Well, hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Ascension Playground. This is your friend Ursie, and I just want to give a shout out again to Danny Shay and to all of the friends of Danny Shay from Danny Shay Tarot, because your interest in Starlight Reports has been overwhelming. It's wonderful to meet others on the path of awakening and, self-awareness and growth who are interested in looking at themselves perhaps with different stories. And when we look at the stories of the stars that are adding their light and energy to that beautiful birth moment of you, your moment that you incarnated. So, with your birth time, the date, and the geography, we can actually create a Starlight Report based on the great work of Dr. Bernadette Brady. She's an astrologer, researcher, and author, and has some great books on fixed stars, plus online classes. Anyway, she researched how the Egyptians, hence the two eyes of Horus, how the ancients would look up at the heavens and try to ascribe which stars were rising and which ones were setting at the moment of birth. This is using something called parans. It's different than in Western astrology, where we look at very specific aspects. According to Bernadette, she likes what the Egyptians do more because she says, you can't really call something conjunct, Western astrology, if it's like light years away from each other. Or look at how vast the difference for an opposition or so she just looked at what the ancients did. And this is just bringing a different way of seeing the stars through the eyes of the myth of the celestial heavens. So even though in 2025, when we look and we say, okay, let's play this game, let me look at my report. And this is part 3 of a 3-part series I've done here on the Ascension Playground to help explain a little more clearly what is it all about. So without further ado, let me go ahead and call up my chart. So if you've been one of the lucky ones to request a Starlight Report, there's periods of time where I have some availability on my calendar, and I love being the messenger, receiving your information, putting it into Bernadette's software, which I bought, and then sending by email to you to see if this resonates with you or not. I love how she says starlight, returning the stars to astrology. And if you catch my first one on Starlight, you'll know that the word astrology, astrologos, is really one way of looking at it is the breath of the stars. You can also say that for neutrinos. So a star language, astrology. But let's look what the Egyptians said. So, and by the way, I love doing this. So thank you for those of you who've wanted to give a donation. Please pay it forward to someone in need around you in your circle. So many people have been generous with me, and so I'm paying it forward as well. You remember, you get this little information about the Egyptians looking at the stars, not as physical entities so much, but more like deities. Like this was the gods and goddesses of the celestial heavens. And one way of thinking of the stars is they're available, they shed their light, they're ready for engagement, but only when invited. So after you learn your stories of your natal stars, consider this idea of playing a game with your heliacal rising and setting stars, really 2 of the most important stars, and they stay with you through the whole life. See if you can invite them in for, hey, nice to meet you, and would you like to co-create with me, especially during this tumultuous 2025? Okay, so it goes on and she explains it. She's very good with her writing. So my rising star coming up from the underworld, from my ancestors. And Danny Shay asked me that question about the underworld. So the ancients really saw this idea of there's the middle world, the underworld, the above world, And then, the tree of life was able to basically grow through all of it. So, this idea of the ancients is the ancestors are still available, and they gifted me with the beautiful star Alphard in the heart of the very large Hydra constellation in the heavens, the heart of the serpent or water snake. Okay, I'm just running through this quickly. There we go. The second star that, let's say, came down from the heavens and was at my descendant, right, which was setting, the Eliacal setting star for me at my birth moment was the beautiful swan constellation carrying Deneb Adije, the shaman star. Really helped me understand why I keep searching and looking and enjoying um, not just the stories of my local community or my family, but around the world to see which ones feel right for me. All right. So then remember, we have angles. So there's the midheaven, the IC, the ascendant and descendant. So some of us have stars that were on the angle, they were in Paran to one of these very activated points of your cross of matter. This is again spirit coming down. This is you as a soul essence and coming onto earth, the earth plane, the horizon. So the cross of matter, right? So if you have a star in Paran at the birth moment, I have Alkes, the crater or the cup. So I will be seen in some ways. This will color my life of holding this chalice. What's in it? And what does that star mean for carrying the cup? And anyway, for those of you who have alkeys in Paran to one of your angles, it would be interesting to know how it showed up for you in the lifetime. Okay, I don't want to get too much in detail because you can watch either video 1 or 2. I have the saddle of Pegasus, the horn of Taurus, and the tail of the lion, plus the left shoulder of the god, boy, Orion. So that's a lot, right? So then the next part was to talk about today in the third part. There are stars that are linked to your planets. Okay, so let me see if I can get this. And then we get to the part that there's some stars that are linked to your, and then we get to this. And then we look, there's a part in the report for some of us where the stars that are linked to your planets. So some are in Paran. So it has to do with angles and geometry and that visual astrology, looking up at the celestial heavens and seeing what was happening at that moment of your birth. I was watching a Netflix movie, one of those Korean, not necessarily a rom-com, but they had this idea of the constellation was charted for the moment of birth for the royals in Korea. So I just thought, well, isn't that funny? We don't do that anymore. We are lucky to get our birth time. So anyway, if you have stars that are linked to your planets, it will show here. And then she says, some stars are at a phase of arising or lying hidden. So if you have a star that is either arising or lying hidden, they can have a different meaning in your life. All right. They'll express themselves in a more fated way. So I'm going to leave that up to you to decide, well, what do you mean by in a more fated way? But yeah. And then moving right along, just to get you intrigued, this one's easier to understand. There are some stars that you may be born with that are circumpolar, and that's an easy to understand. They're always up. You can see them. They're close to the pole. They circulate around the pole, and they never go like into the underworld, meaning they never cross the horizon. All right. Because most stars, the ancients would say, oh, we can look up and there's stars that rise from the underworld, come up, and then they go back down. But there's other stars that stay up at the heavens and they just circle around. They don't come down. So there's just these variances, and some of them will have a certain other emphasis or meaning. If you have either a circumpolar star, a star in Paran that's lying hidden, or rising. So here, let me go. Yeah, a rising or a lying hidden. Hmm. So I'm just going to add that with Bernadette's research, from what the Egyptians would see, if there's a star that is in Paran to one of your planets at the moment of birth, it means that typically it'll have a more fated expression because the star has gone underground, under the horizon, and it's in the underworld, the land of the dead. So it won't be able to receive your prayers according to the ancients. Whereas if you can see a star, you can have a conversation, you can ask it for greater enlightenment, for co creativity. But if it's hidden, it's at a phase where, you have to pay extra attention to that area. And the way I look at it is it's all been a little bit predetermined or prescribed before you came and were physically incarnated. In other words, there's some situations broadly that I think were meant to be. Just the level of intensity is where free will steps in. So you could learn a lesson with the feather, or you could learn the lesson, unfortunately, some of us, with the boulder. So we've learned a little bit more about rising stars, hidden stars, circumpolar. But the easy part of this learning about your starlight report is knowing that there's categories. So the first category, you're born, and then the first chapter really is the stars of your youth. So if you're kind of like around my age, not to divulge which year, but if you were kind of born in 1960s, well, you could look back at your youth. And so I had Capulus, the sword of the warrior, with my moon. So the star Capulus in the constellation of Perseus had a special geometry or Paran with my natal moon. So what did this mean? It meant to be in or have to deal with a hostile environment. And yeah, many would say, listening to my growing up stories, it wasn't like pleasant. So, but it's something when I read this, it's like, oh, I chose it. Oh, I had the sword of the warrior to help me navigate it. Had I known then, I could call on Capulus to, hey, and Capulus represents male passion. It's the I'm going to go assert and do, but on a positive side. Perseus was the hero that came to save Andromeda from the rock she was chained to and almost eaten by a whale or a sea monster. So you'll see you have these other stars. Here comes the tail of the lion, coming back in my youth, working in Paran with my son, my natal son. And yeah. And then I guess this font got a little wicky when I moved everything into Canva. I have the Royal Star Fomalhaut, the Watcher of the South. Fomalhaut also is connected to the energetics of Christ, not Christ in the dogmatic or theology, but Christ essence of love. So these are all these stars of my youth. It's just like wading through it. So just keep going through your youth stars. Some of us have more than others. I have the dolphin with Venus in my youth, meaning an artistic eye with color, design, or performance. So, oh, that's nice to know. It was kind of a gift from the dolphin constellation. Now we're getting to the next chapter. So we did our youth chapter. Here's one now where we're talking about the stars of your prime. All right. So, in the seasons of life, the stars of your prime are going to affect your adulthood, your adult relationships, your children, and your financial prosperity. So, aren't you glad you got a Starlight Report? So, go to the stars of your prime. Here we go. I had the sacred knot with Saturn. Oh, good. In prime, I was the wise. I have access to the energy of the wise, spiritual, or creative leader. Well, that's nice. This sacred knot, Al Rasha, if you think of Pisces, the two fish going in opposite directions, this is the string with a knot on it that brings the two fish together when you look up at the celestial heavens. So that's nice to know. Here's another. I've got the Phoenix, star Anka in my prime as well. So, and then Bellatrix, the left shoulder of the god. Here comes that horn of Taurus again. Ay, ay, ay. Strong and physical. Here's one that I haven't talked about, the pole star, Polaris. Isn't it interesting? My parents named me Ursula. I should just say my German father named me Ursula, but Osa is a name for little bear. And so the pole star Polaris today sits in Ursa Minor, the little bear. So it's kind of cool to know, all right, now I've got it here in my Starlight Report. What does it mean? So you can just do the little cheat sheet with a builder of ideas, artistic work, or of expertise. But here you see that word circumpolar, right? So it never touches the earth. In other words, I have access to Polaris at all times, energetically based on my natal Starlight Report. Okay. You're going to have different stars. And don't worry if you think you got one that's rough. I know there's some rough stars, but this is all about expansion. So if all of us only had nice, easy stars, there wouldn't be that much expansion. So moving right along, oh, I have Ras Al Hagwe, the healer, working in Paran with my son in the prime of my life. And I love this one. A reporter interested in the stories of events and people. Ras Al Hagwe is a beautiful star held in the constellation of Ophiuchus. I know people say that Ophiuchus a little bit differently in different parts of the world, but he's the serpent handler. He's got this big snake kind of between his legs and he's holding it in the heavens. And some astrologers think, this constellation Ophiuchus should really be added to the 12 zodiacal signs as the 13th sign. Anyway, I don't want to digress, but when I saw a reporter in the prime of my life, my adulthood, I was like, oh, yeah, I love Regina Meredith on Gaia TV. She does what's called Open Minds. And I have this kind of like little fantasy of one day being like Regina Meredith. Let me ask you my 20 questions and interview all the interesting people around the world who are doing amazing things with healing and support and alchemy and magic and things that would help the collective. Anyway, I'm digressing. If you have Vindimiatrix, that is the grape gatherer. It is in the constellation of Virgo. So again, a person who's a collector of data. Oy. Anyway, here comes the third chapter. So we've got youth, we've got our prime, and then they call this stars of your latter years. I think she was just trying to be nice. When you get older, stars of your older years. All right, so I'm probably in this phase. All the stars are setting as they form a Paran to a planet. So it's going to have a list of all of them. These stars will be influencing me in the later years or the last third of my life. So, well, if I'm going to live to be 120, maybe I'm not in the latter years. So if you do the math, the latter third of life, They will be influential in the nature of your reputation, how people know you. Um, they'll be looking at how you're going to retire and the autumn of your life, its joys or its sorrows. Dang. Now, don't believe just because it might have a sorrowful star that you have to magnify and make that happen. It's just if it shows up, you go, there you are. I was expecting you, sorrowful star, as an example. And when it shows up, you're like, I've got my work done. I know how to work. I see you. I acknowledge you. And I forgive you, and you let that star keep going, keep going. Just focus on the good stars that you like. Oh, so here I go. What are one of the stars that's in Paran to my later life? Acrux, the Southern Cross. Isn't there a Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young song about the Southern Cross? I could be dating myself for you young whippersnappers who are listening to the Ascension Playground, but Acrux. All right. So a person who is a reformer within the establishment. Well, yeah. And then, so you probably have more stars than I do for that latter chapter of your life. But here's the one that I find most interesting. And I always go to the end. There must be something Asian in me because I always like to go to the end of the book. And, I'm only saying that because in the Western culture, we read from the beginning of the book to the end, whereas it's flipped, like you read the other way. Anyway, so the hearthstone of your life. Do you want to know how people are going to remember you? So these stars are what are called, or they're on the nadir. In astrology terms, it's the bottom of the sky. So if there's a Paran to a planet, that very special geometry, the stars are going to express themselves first as the foundation of your life, and then they come back and they see which roots did you grow. So thank you, Bernadette, for teaching us how to read these charts. So the Hearthstone for me, it's a little embarrassing because I can't remember my Hearthstone stars, but here's what it says. I'm going to have the Southern Cross with my Mars. So Mars is the assertive warrior in foundation. So it's in the foundation, but it's also part of how I'm going to be remembered. I'm going to be remembered as an assertive person, who focuses on money, power, or military force. Well, yeah, I'm going to choose of the three power. I'm going to choose the power of co-creation, the power of creativity. So I'm going to hold that with thank you, Acrux. I'm not going to want to do that military force, especially having been raised in a military family. No, thank you. Okay. Now I can see again the Hearthstone stars in Paran. I have Arcturus. I'm going to be remembered, let's see, as a leader in the arts or in humanistic politics. Interesting. Humanistic, I'm like, yeah, but politics, we'll see. Maybe I'm not in that phase of life yet. Here comes that tail of the lion, Denebula. I can't seem to get away from it. The anthropologist, an interest in different lifestyles. Well, that's true. I'm very interested in all that Florence, Italy has to offer. My husband and I go there often. So lucky me, right? All right. And then I have one of the twins of Gemini named Pollux. Oh, the artisan or living an alternative lifestyle. Yeah, I like that. Okay. Well, that one I'm like, let me focus on Pollux. And then I have Sirius. That's the brightest star in the heavens, working with my natal Mercury in Paran to Mercury at my foundation. Oh, skilled with language or ideas. Well, part of having the Ascension Playground is to have these monologues with myself, and hopefully someone's listening. So thank you, Sirius, because whenever you have Sirius, which is in the big star or the big dog constellation of Canis Major, it is so powerful. I know Bernadette calls Sirius A as the scorcher or the one that carries the eternal flame. So if you've got it, it's really, you can be worked to good or to other. It depends on how you carry the light. All right. So I'm supposed to work with ideas, communications, and business dealings. Oh boy. Here comes that grape gatherer, Vindemiatrix, the gatherer. I know I'm missing some, I think it's to my Mercury again. A person who measures and a collector of data. I wonder what I'm measuring in the old age of my life. We'll see what happens. So that's all that I have. And yeah, if you're interested in buying Bernadette software, it hasn't been updated, I understand, in over a decade, but you can look up more of Bernadette's work by going to www.zintara.com, ZYNTARA.com. And don't ask me what Zintara means. It's probably some kind of Egyptian footnote for something pretty big. But I wanted to show you also when we do starlight reports, what I put behind my head today is the Egyptian Ankh, because, and I actually wear a Hathor Ankh with me. This image actually came before this one, but you can see how beautiful this symbol is of the Ankh. Here we go. And if you were raised Catholic like I was, oftentimes you'll see in a priest garb some visual imagery that looks very similar to that, oftentimes with a P and then an X. But anyway, it's the key to eternal life. So that's why I kind of like to wear this little Hathorian one. I like to think that it's sonically helping me open up my voice box to share all those ideas, the grapes that I've gathered, all these little pearls and nuggets. So if you're still listening on the Ascension Playground, I am going to open up to receiving more um, people who want to have a Starlight Report. I just have these pockets of time. So if you are interested, I think I can take another 12 people. So go ahead, read in the description box, subscribe to the channel, and you'll find you just have to send me 3 things: birth date, that's month, day, and year; birth time, indicating AM or PM; and then the city, state, and country, if it's a country that's not very familiar to me. And if you email that to me at theascensionplayground@gmail.com, I'll have your email address and I can just zip you back a report. But hold this gently. It's not meant to be like frontal lobe, linear thinking. It's just like, wow, I go through my day sometimes. And so when things get a little heated or a little bit colorful is a good word. I go, oh, that's because I have Alphard as my heliacal rising star. I chose to come in and have intense emotional experiences. So here it comes. And if I'm always seemingly wandering around having fun experiences, it's like, oh, yeah, that's because I have Deneb Adije, the shaman star and Isis sitting on the other shoulder. Okay. So, whatever chapter you're in your life, you can look at grandchildren or children, see the stars that are helping them in their youth, see the stars that are helping them in their prime, see the stars that are helping them in the latter years of life, and then go look at those Hearthstone. Just go right to the end and go, how am I going to be remembered? So for me, it's more encouragement, like, okay, keep sharing these ideas, keep bringing your artistic, colorful way of sharing them. And yeah, for those of you who enjoy it, great. For those who don't, they can always change the channel, which is fine with me. But I just want to say thank you for encouraging me, because, yeah, to see the playground grow, it's just one of those things like, wow, let me know what else you'd like to know about these Starlight reports. And if you've received a report, it would be kind of fun to have like a sentence or two. How did it land for you? You know, or is it still too confusing? If it's still too confusing, I might have to come back and do a 4th video. Anyway, you guys take care. I know that the energies are really blup and the Schumann resonance is dark and then on. We're just living in a very interesting time. But going back to the ancient Egyptians, calling in the eye of Horus so that we can see clearly, inwardly, like who and what we are to know where we want to go. All right. Hope to see you next time on the Ascension Playground. Bye, everybody.